Metal tooling and printmaking a mandala. The tools you will need are tooling foil, blunt pencils or pens, felt, paper, and crayons. Now I have some scrap pieces of metal tooling foil that I have already cut, and you'll see that I also have my felt and a pencil and a pen, and you can choose which one you want to use, doesn't matter which one. And the practice scrap metal is just going to be for me to kind of test out how hard I need to press when I'm tooling the foil. Now you can cut out your scrap piece or just leave it as a rectangle or square. You do want to be careful about the edges and make sure you don't handle it unsafely. You got to carefully handle it. Step one is putting the felt under the foil. The felt is actually going to kind of give a cushion to the foil underneath when you're pressing down. If you didn't have that cushion, the tooling wouldn't happen. So I decided that I was going to tool the silver side, and on the other side, on the copper side, is going to be the embossed side. So the word embossed means it's kind of like a raised design on the other side. So this practice time is just to see what you can do in this little scrap piece of metal tooling foil. You can do different symbols, you could do your name. If you want to turn this scrap piece of foil into an ornament or some kind of necklace, pendant, dog tag, it's up to you. You don't have to keep it, but some students like to keep it to make something out of it. I'm testing out how lines look and how different shapes look, and if I press really, really hard, what happens. So if I pressed really hard, I could actually cut through the foil. This foil isn't very thick, so that's why practicing is a good thing. So if you accidentally cut through this foil, it's okay, but you don't want to cut through your larger piece of foil. So after your practice is done, you're going to get a 6-inch by 6-inch piece of foil, and you need to decide which side you're going to tool on. And the next step is going to be folding over your edges or taping the edges of your foil. By taping them or folding them, you actually will make it a little safer to handle, especially when you're turning in your project at the end of the day. It's easier for me, Miss Bryans, to collect everything when I don't have a bunch of sharp edges sticking out at me. So if you do fold it, make sure you fold it twice. So I already folded each edge once, and I only folded it just a tiny bit. If you're going to fold the edges, only fold it just a little bit. And this is going to kind of make a nice little border around your tooled design. So now I'm folding it a second time on each edge, and that's going to make sure that there are no rough cut edges sticking out, and I don't have to worry about getting hurt. Now with tape, you could just put a piece of masking tape on each edge and fold it over, and that way you can actually even remove the tape later if you don't want the tape anymore. With folding, you're going to have to keep it folded. You can't go back after it's been folded. That folded crease is going to stay there in your tooled foil. So once you have your edges folded over, you need to decide which side you're going to tool and which side you're going to emboss. So the embossed side will be the side that has the raised design, and that's the side you'd probably want to show off. I decided that I'm going to tool the silver side because I want the copper side to be embossed. So the next step is going to be creating an outline of your design, the mandala design that you've already made. You're going to do an outline on the foil. Now an outline means that you're not pressing very hard. Even though you can see that my design is showing up pretty quickly while I'm using my pen, you don't want to press very hard. So I'm only pressing very lightly and doing the beginnings of my design. Now you could use a stencil for this part or a ruler if you really are worried about straight lines. I can do it pretty freehand, but if you want it to be a lot more accurate, go ahead and use a ruler or stencils, that's fine. So I'm going to continue creating my outline, just pressing very lightly. The reason why we want to press lightly at first is because if we wanted to change something or if we make a mistake, it's easier to change when you've pressed it lightly. Part 2 is embossing. So this is when we're going to press down harder on our outline. So now I'm going through and I'm going back over the lines and designs I've made, and I'm even going to add a few things and go over a few things again. And by pressing harder, I'm going to emboss the design onto the other side of the tooling foil. So the copper side is going to have the embossed design. Now you could use a pen or a pencil. It doesn't matter which one you use. You can decide which one you think would be best. And I'm going to keep working, keep putting my designs on. And you might notice that small details aren't too hard to do. You can do small circles, small squares, and triangles and lines. Flowers, you could even do images. I have a cool zigzag lightning bolt design inside of mine. Now this is my tooled side, so the side where I actually press down into the metal. And this is the embossed side, so this is the side that's raised out. And the reason why it's raised out is because I used my felt underneath my tooling foil. I'm kind of switching over to see how the pencil feels. It's easier if you use a blunt pencil or a mechanical pencil with no lead. The mechanical pencils with no lead work pretty well, so if you have a mechanical pencil, go ahead and use that. You might notice if you use a pen that the pen marks show up, and I don't really mind that, but if you don't want the pen to show up in your tooled design, go ahead and use a mechanical pencil or a blunted regular wooden pencil. And you'll see I'm going back over my designs to make sure that I press down hard enough. I'm going to make sure that I've pressed down hard enough in all parts of my designs to make my mandala really stand out. I'm even just pressing down and making some small polka dots along the edge. Adding lots of details, making sure that I'm filling up a lot of that space. You can even press down and color in places, and those places are going to be really pressed out on the embossed side. And they look pretty cool, especially when you go and move on to the printmaking part, which is the next part. Part 3 is the printmaking. So I've just about filled up all my space, and it feels really cool. It's nice and bumpy. And part 3 is printmaking. So now we're going to create a bunch of prints from this metal tooled tile. So the first step of printmaking is you need to lay a piece of paper over the embossed side of the metal tooled mandala, and then choose any color of crayon and begin rubbing over the print. And you don't need to press down very hard. It helps if you hold the crayon at an angle. And it'll start picking up all of your little designs that you tooled into the foil. And it might not look totally perfect, and that's okay. This is a print, and in printmaking, a lot of times it doesn't come out exactly the way you think it would, and that's just fine. You can always do a different color or do a different technique if you need to. Maybe you need to hold the crayon differently to get a different effect, and that's fine. So you want to make sure you go all the way to the edge, and it's kind of tricky, especially if you folded your edges over, because you might see the outline of where you folded over. That's okay, no big deal. It kind of adds an interesting border. If you taped your edges, you don't have to run into that as much. You don't have to worry about it. But that's one thing you do have to consider if you do fold your, or if you did fold your tooled foil. So I'm making sure that I didn't miss any places and I got most of my design. And the third step is to choose a different color crayon, and you can blend this color crayon with the other color. So I had blue and then I chose purple, and I think these colors work really well together because these are cool colors. You could do half purple, half blue. You don't have to mix them necessarily, but you do need to do 2 colors per print. And eventually you're going to need at least 3 prints. So 3 different prints of your metal tooled mandala. And it's pretty cool because even when you feel your print, if you feel the surface, it almost feels like the surface of the paper is embossed too. So I did a pretty good print. It's in the center of the paper. It looks pretty nice. And the last step I want to do is sign, date, and number that print. So I signed my name, I put the date, and then I'm going to number the print. So I'm going to put 1 out of 3. So 1/3. That means that's the first print that I did. And then for the next print, I would do 2 out of 3. And then the last print would be 3 out of 3. Now, if you want to do other colors and change it up, that's fine. You can always make a new 3 out of 3 or a new 2 out of 3. If you find that your tooled foil is kind of pressed down, you can retool that foil. So if you need to go back and retool the foil, you can do that. That's just fine. Sometimes it happens. And there I have my 3 prints next to my tooled foil mandala.